Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing, it's one of our series, kind of Thailand tales, kind of reminiscing about some older days here in Thailand. And one thing I was thinking about the other day was the past incarnation of quote-unquote property holding companies. And for those who are unaware, especially at one time, there was a much more enthusiastic, if you will, how do I even put it? It was a seemingly looser notion, looser paradigm regarding quote-unquote holding companies for Thai property investors. And what we're talking about is, for those who are unaware, foreign nationals in Thailand are barred from owning real estate in any practical sense. There are some exceptions. Most notably, a big one is condos. We're not really talking about that here. Although you could have a Thai property holding company, especially that owns property within what's called the Thai quota of a condominium juristic person complex. Leaving that aside, what we're talking about here is a company that's set up to own land. And land is specifically barred. Foreigners cannot own land in Thailand. And in fact, they cannot use just a pretextual or pretensive, structure to circumvent that rule. And, there are circumstances where one of these property holding companies, especially now, can be set up, but they really have to be properly maintained in order to meet all requirements under Thai law and not be seen purely as just a circumvention of the law. Now, there was a time, and this was actually before my time here in Thailand, so prior to about 15 years ago, when it was much more, for lack of a better term, lax, or at least enforcement was. And this is the key point, because it's interesting. I'll talk to older expats and things, non-lay people, folks that are expats that were kind of around the business community, maybe even the legal community, kind of knew a thing or two. They would tell you, actually, strictly speaking, it was an enforcement issue. It wasn't really, or a lack of enforcement issue. It didn't have anything to do with the laws. The regulations and the laws have basically remained unchanged essentially. But, going back prior to 15 years ago into the turn of the last century, going into the 90s, it was a lot laxer. They just, it was almost pretty loosey-goosey, for lack of a better term. Folks were just setting up very pretextual companies, the point of pretensive companies that were being used to hold Thai property. Now, problems arose. Most notably, a lot of folks just thought, okay, that's done. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And those folks oftentimes ran into problems with things like audited financial statements, which must be filed, and they got into trouble trying to hold on to their property because they got in arrears on doing those kind of filings, and that can lead to taxes and penalties, etc. But more to the point, when I was first coming into Thailand, again, some roughly a little less than 15 years ago, there did become much more active enforcement against these kind of structures. And as a result, you really can't look at it the way, if you read something online from like 20 years ago about how to set something like this up, it don't necessarily follow that, because today it's a totally different story. Again, compliance is key. You need to make sure everything is in compliance with respect to the law, and there may be circumstances where it's just impossible for a foreigner to be involved on a corporate structure that is owning property. Again, it's going to be circumstantially dependent, but there may be circumstances where it's just an impossibility in the current times we're in.